Hello everybody, so today I want to talk about callouts and paladins and specifically why the in-game callouts suck. Most of the time I guarantee people don't notice that they're there, they show up just above your avatar in the bottom left corner. I don't think I've met a single person who uses them, and most people that I know think they're kind of a joke. So I want to talk about why they suck and what can be done about them so that they can fulfill their intended purpose and not suck. Let's get into it. First of all, let's go over why callouts are actually important. Callouts are important because you want to be able to quickly communicate information to your team. You want to be able to tell your team the location of the other team, or the location of another specific player, or just where you want your own team to go. If you didn't have callouts, you would just be reduced to left, mid, right, top, bottom. And while that's great, it's not usually good enough unless you're on Shattered Desert. Let's say I'm on Bright Marsh and I want my team to go here. I could just say go right, but that might not communicate specifically enough where I want my team to actually go. Even if I tell my team to go apps, which is what that general side of the map is called, there are other places that can also be called apps, so it could get confusing. But if I tell my team to go long, then they know exactly where to go. Now, callouts can't be too precise, because you have to strike a balance between being able to be memorized and being precise. We don't need specific callouts for the different locations inside long. Like, you could split it up into their long, our long, mid long, I don't know. And you could do that. Those callouts would be useful sometimes, and they would definitely be more precise. But again, the purpose of callouts is to communicate information to your team. The differences between these three spots doesn't really matter. Like, if you're telling your team to go there, they're going to end up in the right place. If you're telling your team to look there, they're still going to look at the right place. You don't need three separate callouts for this area, so striking this balance between memorizability and precision is important. On the flip side, if you have too few callouts, they're just not useful. Behind isn't a good callout because of this reason. If you've ever heard, as a backliner, someone's behind us, you have no clue where they are, because if you're in the backline, chances are there's a whole heck of a lot of map behind you. So you're frantically looking around, because they could be anywhere, and someone's behind you, but you have no idea where to look at. The callout wasn't precise enough. And also, if you have too many callouts and no one's going to bother using them, they're going to be impossible to memorize, and that defeats the whole purpose. The names also need to be pretty short. You don't want to let your teammates know someone's flanking them in 10 seconds. They need to know now, so the names need to be short and obvious. They can't be confused with other areas of the map, which is actually an interesting problem besides the words used, and that's that sometimes it's really hard to actually name callouts. Shattered Desert is a good example of this, but other maps have this issue too. Bazaar has this issue. Like, I could divide Shattered Deserts into different regions just fine, but if I actually had to name these regions, it would be really difficult because Shattered Desert is basically all the same. So it's not a super obvious thing, but designing maps that have unique parts to them makes creating good callouts for those maps a lot easier. A lot of callouts are just the name of the thing that's in that place. You have fire on Stone Keep because there's a fireplace there. You have frog on Frog Isle because it's a frog statue. You have orange on Serpent Beach because it is a room that is colored, you guessed it, orange. You get the idea. And the community already has made callouts. There's a reason that I called this certain place on Bright Marsh long and not some other word for it like falls. There's a waterfall above it. You could easily call that place falls. And waterfall is an actual callout on Serpent, not an official one. The official callouts say that area is called secret, but we'll get to the official callouts in a second. But the community basically made their own callouts. Evil Mojo wanted callouts to get more widespread. It gets more people talking, the callouts get more useful, and it also really helps if you have an official accepted series of callouts because you can unify everyone's calls. Sometimes callouts vary from region to region and team to team. So let's go over Evil Mojo's solution to all this. Let's look at Frog. Two reasons to that. First is because I want to bring up that these are actually the second round of official callouts that we got, because the first were so bad that they got changed. If we look at this map and we look at number 8, it's called Jag. That's a pretty good callout. That's reasonable. It's reasonably large, it's specific, it's a good callout. This was my favorite official callout in the game because before it was called Cracked Jaguar. Now this is awful, but it's so long, I think it's funny. So it is worth pointing out that Evil Mojo did take a look at these, but I don't know if they actually changed any of the areas. I think they just took a look at the names, which isn't really the issue here. The issue is that when you look at separate areas of the map that are important, they're not cleanly divided into separate callouts. Let's look at danger. Danger is 15 and 16. It's a very common callout for Frog Isle. So you can see that danger gets split up into rise and jungle stairs. So once again, we can kind of see the naming issue. Jungle stairs is 3 syllables. Rise is fine. It's 1 syllable. But you could have named 16 jungle or stairs. So jungle stairs is a bit much. It's such a small, simple mistake, but it kind of shows that they don't understand the point behind callouts. Like, you wouldn't name it jungle stairs if you didn't understand what made up a good callout, or a good callout name rather. But looking at the actual regions themselves, there's not really any significant difference between region 15 and 16. There's no situation where it matters in a call which side they're playing on. And this is something that sort of comes with playing the game, realizing what part of the maps are important. So this is just an example of 2 callouts that can be simplified into 1. So remember, again, what a good callout is. Short name, useful, precise, easy to remember. For callouts 15 and 16, one of them was a short name, the other doesn't. It's a useful place to have its own callout, but you only need 1 callout, not 2. It's precise enough, that's fine. Easy to remember, I'd say it completely and utterly fails, purely because of the fact that the community has been calling that danger for literally years. So not having that area of the map called danger has the potential to be really confusing, and there's really just no reason for it. Something interesting that I think Evil Mojo did is they separated the cart pushes into regions. In almost every game, you'll hear this area called mid. It's just the middle of wherever the fight is, right? It's the middle of where the objective is, it's just mid. On Frog Isle, Evil Mojo decided to divide mid into no less than 6 regions, which I think is a little weird. Mid is a very simple callout. It's where the cart goes. Everybody knows where the cart goes, so it's kind of weird. If you look at what a callout is, it's short name, useful, precise, easy to remember. If you say back mid or their mid, it's a short name, it's useful, it's precise, it's easy to remember. You could maybe argue that it's not precise, but again, looking at Frog Isle as an example, if we're on a mid fight and I say Victor is back mid, where do you think the Victor is? And let's say the place I was thinking was right here. If you're playing the game and I tell you to look back mid, would you have seen the Victor? Even if you don't know that he's precisely there, would you have seen him if you looked to where you think back mid was? So dividing the cart push into 6 separate regions breaks the easy to remember part of a good callout. I'm going to show you the name of each region. What were the names? There's a non-zero chance that you got all that, but even then, you can kind of get the point, right? What was the one callout that I was using? Mid. It's just so much easier to remember. So you can kind of see how there's some pretty major flaws with the current callouts in the game. You can literally have the objective point, then the payload push, maybe the place where the cart ends up. So 3 regions maximum, but instead we have 6. Now let's stop bullying Frog Isle and go to another map, Drag Falls. Let's look at how the mid-fight is divided. We have 4 regions that we're going to look at. We have Sunroom, Capture Point, Cubby, and Moonroom. So again, we run into the same little issue of the community callouts not aligning with the official callouts. Moonroom is called Dark by everybody I know. I played in NA, I played in Europe, it's just called Dark. So having that room be officially called Dark would just make it easier for everybody. But Jag kind of shows the opposite problem of Frog. Let's look at callout 23. Let's look at this capture point. If I say there's a Victor back mid, where do you think he is? If you look there and you're playing the game, can you see him? Once again, I'd be willing to bet that you could. You also see that back mid doesn't have its own region, so it's not necessarily that these problems were specific to Frog Isle, it's just that it's not all bad. But we kind of have the opposite problem of Frog Isle. There are some missing callouts in Jag. People frequently like to hide in these 2 corners, and they're important because without callouts, how would you quickly and precisely communicate to your team that location? And they are important callouts because chances are if somebody is in that corner, they're 1 HP, and if someone on your team would just push them, then they would die. So it's an important place to have a call for, and yet, no callout. And if you're wondering how you would differentiate between each side, let's call it corner, how do you differentiate between each corner? It's just their corner and our corner. That's just kind of how it works on mid fights, because otherwise with symmetrical map design it just gets way too complicated. There's another problem that Jag Falls has, and that is on Face. Face is callout number 12. Let's zoom in on this little area because there is a lot going on here. This place is divided in a kind of strange way. We have Big Wall that somehow contains the stairs that lead up to Face, the area behind this rock, and this area way over here. This region is huge. But when you think about it, you kind of run into a really weird problem. You don't really want an area of the map to not have a callout, because at that point you're just confusing people. It's weird, what do you call it? But you never do need to call it because it's not really useful. So I think this big region that you can technically use to call the lesser used areas if you want to, but the callout mostly refers to one specific place. Those are fine. This specific example is not. It's just too big. It's not precise at all, and there are important areas in it. And honestly, screw it. Let's just redo the entire thing. I'll show you what I think are good callouts. Let's go over what we have to fix first. We've got the mid problem again, where the mid fight is divided into 2 sections. We've got a bunch of important areas that don't necessarily have their own regions, and we've got some weird names. So first of all, let's bring back mid, let's make that its own region. Then let's shorten Big Wall so that it doesn't contain stairs. This rock is no longer going to be called Big Wall, we're going to call it Rock, because I'm very clever. And I mean, this is also just good naming convention. Even if I didn't tell you where Rock is, it's at the rock. It's pretty straightforward, you know where it is, it's a good name for the callout. Face can stay as it is. Region 10 is called Boxes, which is good, but we're going to reshape it a little bit so that it doesn't get in the way of mid. This area out here, Region 11, is called Vista, which we're going to rename to Cliff because I believe that's a more common name and it just makes a bit more sense. I've heard it called Face in scrims before, but that's not really precise, and I don't think Evil Mojo would really like it, and it'd be confusing to new players. This room here, number 6, is called Access. I've never heard that before. I think the community has a name for it, but I honestly forget, so we're gonna rename it Tree, because there's a big ass tree on it. The spawn area is a bit of a mess. You have names like Long Dark, Long Room, Long Yard, Short Dark, and Short Room. Where are they? They're not descriptive at all. I think we can keep the name thing with the rooms. I've heard them called Far and Close before, but let's stick with Short and Long because I think that's a bit more common. And for the rooms, they can just be Short Room and Long Room. Spawn could just be Spawn, and then you have the capture point, or mid. So just to compare how the callouts that I've been suggesting compare to the actual current official ones that we have, I'm going to make you take 2 tests. Or not, it's up to you. This is a YouTube video. 1, I want you to remember the 6 official names that Frog Isle used. And I'd bet money that you can't. And then I want you to remember the name that I used. So which one's easier? Capture point, capture ramp, trap, worm, hook, and push point, or mid? And then 2, let's run the same test with new and old Jag Falls callouts. It's like sort of pin the tail on the donkey, but pin the victor on the map. So using the old callouts, Victor is Big Wall, Victor is Face, Victor is Main. And as I'm writing this, I didn't even realize, but there's legitimately a location on Jag Falls called Main. So even if you're halfway across the map, you can say Victor is Main, and Main is a specific location, which I honestly think is just kind of a complete name failure. But now, using my versions, Victor is Face, Victor is Rock, Victor is Back Mid, Victor is Boxes. So these are just some examples of what good, proven callouts look like. I'm not going to make them for every map because frankly that would take a really long time and it wouldn't really be worth it. But, you know, if I, for some reason, did have enough time, then, you know, me and some company could maybe work together to create and maybe even implement better callouts in the game. I don't know. So to summarize, callouts have short names, they're useful, they're precise, and they're easy to remember. The official callouts in the game right now are sometimes good, but a lot of them are very, very poor. And the biggest thing that shows their failure is the fact that nobody uses them. Like, do you know anyone that uses these? I can tell you all the used callouts for all the maps off the back of my hand, except for that one on Jag Falls, but they're not the official callouts. So if Evil Mojo could change their callouts to have short names, be useful, be precise, and be easy to remember, and work with the comp scene so that they don't have to do everything from scratch, that would help the game a decent bit. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.